The Prepper Podcast, Episode 6.
They've got to know whether or not their president's a crook.
The American people would never vote for socialism. He said, under the name of liberalism, the American people will adopt every fragment of the socialist program.
Hey everybody, this is Ken Jensen, and this is the Prepper Podcast. The Prepper Podcast is an up-to-date survival podcast based on military wilderness and modern-day survival, and it may be found at theprepperpodcast.com. Like I said, I'm Ken Jensen, and this is the podcast about everything survival. This is episode 6, and I'm going to discuss how to build a fire, the techniques and tools that make it easier. First, you need to understand one thing. Fire building is 80% prep work and only about 20% of the actual work. Okay, unless you're doing a bow drill, then, you got a lot of work ahead of you. But 80% of the success of obtaining a fire is in your prep work. All right, so let's first start off by going over some different fire designs. All right, well, we can do a TPee, which is great for starting the fires because fire wants to go up. So if we lay the sticks over in a TP format, leave it open on one side, you can throw things underneath it, like the kindling and stuff like that that's already on fire. You can throw it underneath, and it just burns up into the wood that's already there. The next one is the log cabin. The log cabin is it's a pretty obvious, I guess. If you build a fire and then around that fire you stack your wood, kind of like you did Lincoln logs as a kid. You stack two, and then you stack the other two perpendicular to that, and then you stack the next two perpendicular to that, which is parallel to the first ones, and you just keep stacking it back and forth like that until you basically will build a chimney. Now the thing about the log cabin is this is the best one for cooking because it brings in all kinds of air and stuff from underneath. The fire is a little bit hotter, but it's a lot more evenly distributed. All right. We have the pyramid. The pyramid is kind of like the log cabin in the way it looks, but if you took like 5 sticks, a large firewood, I guess, and put them side by side in a row, and then that's your base, and then you stack the next firewood on top of that the opposite direction, perfectly perpendicular to the base. Stack about 5 more on top of that, and as you go up, you're going to crisscross it, and as you go up, you go a little bit smaller each time. So level 3 is smaller than level 2. The diameter of the sticks in level 4 is smaller than the diameters in level 3. 5 is smaller than level 4. And what you do here is once this actually does start burning, it will burn low. It will burn fairly well, but this is a very dense way of putting the wood together so that you end up with a lot less fuel being burned. How's that? A lot less fuel is going to be burned, and it's going to last longer because you've got more fuel there. So this one's going to burn down. The TP and the log cabin, they both burn up. The pyramid is one that's used a lot if you don't want to have somebody watch the fire through the night. All right, because it's going to last so long and it's not going to burn really hot and really bright. Now there's some more that you can dig trenches and stuff like that. Let me think about what that one right there is called. It's called the cross ditch. You'll basically dig 2 ditches in an X pattern or in a cross pattern, and the fire is going to be in those. And what that does is it channels the air into the ditches and underneath the fires. And there's another one called a lean-to, and if you know how to build a lean-to shelter, then you'll kind of get what I'm talking about. But it starts at the ground, comes up to like it basically, if you did it kind of like a tripod with 2 short ends and 1 long leg, then you stack a bunch of wood and stuff on the sides of the long leg, and it will basically burn up the lean-to. That's another one of those. All right, so now we've talked about a couple of those designs. Let's talk about the basic setup. The way we're going to set it up for a fire. First thing is we're going to try to get ourselves some good firewood. We want to have all the firewood around the area that we think we're going to need in order to get this thing blazing. All right, so you're going to go out, get all the firewood that you can. And then you've got to get your kindling, which is going to be old dry sticks, stuff like that. Stuff that'll catch fire pretty good, but it's not the stuff that you're going to initially use to get the fire going. It's going to be the stuff, once you have a really tiny fire, you're going to put this stuff on top of it, let it catch fire, and so it'll burn hot enough to get the main firewood going. So the first thing that you're going to use is called tinder. All right. Let's talk about tinder. Hold on 1 second, guys. Let me go ahead and pause this. All right. I noticed that I kind of skipped around on you. I wanted to go ahead and talk about the kindling a little more. It can be small dry branches, it can be small pieces of wood, and there's things called fuzz sticks. Let me explain fuzz sticks a little bit. If you take a larger log that you would use for firewood and it's dry, and you happen to abrasion or put abrasions all around it with your survival knife or your hatchet or something like that, so it's got a lot of really small pieces of wood coming off of it, splintering off of it. Basically, this is what you're doing here is you're creating kindling on the outside of your firewood. All right, so the firewood is still one big bulk, but then there's all these little bitty pieces coming off the outside of it because you've chopped it all up and hacked it all up, so that those smaller pieces will catch fire a lot more easily than the big piece, and then they will put fire to the big piece. These are called fuzz sticks. Now that I talked about kindling, I'm going to go ahead and just talk about some methods for striking a fire. First, I want to make sure that everybody understands that you better have lighters and you better have matches, because if you have to resort to other types of making fire, you've probably failed in having enough equipment to build a good fire. If you have to fall on more primitive techniques, then you've pretty much failed as a survivalist. So make sure that you have plenty of lighters and plenty of matches. As far as the lighters, I make sure that I have Bics, and I really don't like Zippos for out in the wilderness. When they get wet, they don't work. But the Bic lighters, they work almost all the time. Just the real cheap 99-cent Bic lighters are $1.50 now. And I like butane lighters. The butane lighters don't work real well when they're wet, but they work really well against the wind, whereas the Bic lighters don't. So I like to keep butane lighters and cheap Bic lighters. I like to keep matches. Keep either kitchen matches in a waterproof container or just waterproof matches. It's best to just have waterproof matches. And if you can put those in a waterproof container, like, I don't know, an old M&M, you remember the M&M minis? They have those tiny little round tubes, You can put matches in those. You can break your matches down to fit them into a film canister for like the old cameras. They have the little round film canisters. Those are pretty waterproof. So you got that. You got double protection against water. So now that we've talked about what you should actually have to build a fire with whenever it really matters, let's go into the other things that I always try to build my fires with whenever I have time, because these are where you are going to fail in your skill if you don't actually do it. I don't use lighters or matches if I can use one of these others while camping, but in a survival situation, I'd prefer to use lighters or matches. You can use the magnesium bars with the flint and steel on the other side. It's just a big chunk of magnesium. It's only $1 or $2, and it's got a little flint bar. And then they give you a piece of a hacksaw blade to go with that, and you use that to strike the flint. So you'll just shave a bunch of magnesium into a pile into your tinder, and I'll talk about tinder here in just a minute. But you'll shave a bunch of that into it, and then you'll strike the flint with the steel. The sparks will catch on the magnesium. The magnesium gets super hot, and it will start that tinder up right away. All right, steel wool and a 9-volt battery. Steel wool's really cool, and it's got to be the old stuff. If you think about SOS pads before they started using soap in them, so the really fine steel wool and a 9-volt battery, you put the 9-volt battery onto the steel wool, and that steel wool will get so hot whenever it's moving the current for the 9-volt battery that will actually catch on fire. And once it's on fire, the whole thing will actually catch on fire just because of how small it is. It's actually flammable. So just keep in mind that steel wool and 9-volt battery is a pretty cool trick. Another cool trick is cotton and Vaseline. Now, I know that you actually need something to strike the fire, but as kind of a mediary point between striking the fire and lighting the tinder is cotton and Vaseline, because it catches so well, and it will go for quite some time, and it burns so hot that it's great for lighting your tinder and lighting your kindling. So don't forget cotton and Vaseline. I don't have it on the notes here, but it just came to mind as char cloth. You make your own char cloth, and really all you do is you're going to end up cutting up like some old tidy-whities or a white t-shirt like the Hanes or Fruit of the Loom t-shirts, and you're going to go ahead and put that in a container. One thing that I've used is a Altoids tin, and you'll put that over the fire and you'll char it up, but you don't want it to burn. So you'll end up charring it up until it's black, and that stuff will catch fire real nice. All right, so starting the fire. We're going to light the tinder. All right. I know I didn't tell you what the tinder was, but I'm going to tell you now, because you need to make sure that you have the tinder on hand. You need the wood, the kindling, and the tinder. So for tinder, you can get things like cattails. They grow in like more marshy areas. You can get dried birch or cedar bark. It's the underside of the bark. As you're peeling it off, there's some fibrous material underneath there, and you can go ahead and kind of strip that off of the bark with your survival knife, or you can actually just kind of pull it off, and it catches really well. It burns really fast as well. So it's a good tinder. Another thing that you can use is wax. Just bring like some beeswax or old candle wax or any type of wax that you could use for a candle. You can pretty much use as kindling. Just get it started, and it will work. If you're going to do wax, you may as well go ahead and put a piece of yarn or a piece of string in there and make that wax a candle. There's no point in just wasting wax when you could make a candle out of it. It's going to wick up all that wax into the cloth, and it's just going to burn for a long time. longer than if you were just trying to burn wax alone. Let's see. I already talked about char cloth. That was the next on my note. So I guess it was in there. It was just hidden a little bit. That's fine. What about moss? Dried moss. If you find that stuff, remember it's got to be dried. It can't be living moss. So if you find some old dead moss and it's nice and dried out, that stuff will light very easily as well. Dried straw and pine needles, they'll do all right. They're not great. They're not my choice. I always have trouble getting those going as well as the other stuff. And I usually don't use leaves unless I absolutely have to, because the leaves don't work real well either. Another one that everybody can find in their home is dryer lint. I don't throw away dryer lint. I put it into little bags, and I take those little bags camping because I like to use the dryer lint as a fire starter, as a tinder. It works really well. All right, we're going to, as we're starting this up, we already have all the main wood around it, and we're going to create the kindling teepee, which is going to just be a bunch of dried branches or fuzz sticks and stuff like that in a teepee, but you leave it open on one side. So probably about 120 degrees will be a teepee. No, not 120, about 270 degrees will be a teepee, and maybe about 90 degrees or so will be open-faced so that you can put your tinder in there. All right, so now you've got all your wood surrounded, and then you make a teepee out of your kindling. It's called a kindling teepee, and the kindling teepee, like I said, is open on one side so that you can get the tinder in there. So you strike the tinder, you get the tinder ablaze, and then you move the tinder into the kindling. The kindling already has to be set up. You need to make it low enough or put your tinder high enough so that the flames can hit the wood or can hit the tinder so that the tinder can catch a blaze. And as the tinder starts catching on fire, you start adding your firewood. All right, you may have a little bit of struggle with this, off and on a little bit while you're trying to do this, but it is really not that difficult. Once you get the hang of it, it's not that difficult. So with that, you should have a blazing fire, and you should be protected from all the animals and stuff of the night, everything that goes bump in the night, because at night most things stay away from flame. Well, this is Ken Jensen. This is the Prepper Podcast, episode 6, and you can find this episode at theprepperpodcast.com/006. Go ahead and go there. You can see my show notes, and if I got any links or anything to put on there, then they'll be there as well. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this, and I would like some feedback. I really do want feedback, especially from you guys in iTunes, because as I get feedback from you, and I get 5-star reviews from people, it goes ahead. It puts me higher up on the iTunes list. I've been trying new things, trying to get this thing situated, and I promise you it's going to get better. But as far as now, I need you guys to go give me reviews and go ahead and give me some stars and let everybody know how you like the Prepper Podcast. And hopefully that's 5-star reviews because you really, really, really like the Prepper Podcast. I would really appreciate any feedback on iTunes and any stars on iTunes that you could give me. And I really would like for you to go to theprepperpodcast.com/006 and give me a bunch of comments on there so that I can reply back. I really do enjoy replying back to everybody's comments. I know other friends of mine that do podcasts. They do occasionally get the rogue person in there that thinks that it's funny to go ahead and give them some really ridiculous comments. And if you give me ridiculous comments, it won't make it on there. That's my right. It's my property. It's my website. But as you know, you do not have to agree with me on my episodes. As long as you are a normal, sane person, I promise you that your comments will stay on my website. You do not have to agree with me. You could completely disagree with me. And the great thing about that is it starts more conversations. I love debating with people, but debating doesn't mean that I argue with you. You have your point of view, I have mine, and we can explain our sides, and at the end of it, we may go away both disagreeing with each other, but we can do it in a civilized manner on the comments section of my website. Well, with that, I want to say goodbye to you guys. I hope that you have been enjoying my podcast up until now, and I'll see you guys next week. Talk to you later. Bye.